This is a part of the professional development series presented by the Oklahoma Successful Adulthood Program, which is funded by Oklahoma Human Services and coordinated by the National Resource Center for Youth Services. I am Robbie Wheat, the consultation manager for the Oklahoma Successful Adulthood Program and your host for today's session. Today's session will be focusing on the supporting foster youth and families through the Pandemic Act, how Oklahoma is responding to this act, and the expansion of eligibility of services under this act. So recognizing that the COVID-19 public health emergency has presented youth and families with unique risks and challenges to navigate, legislation was passed which provides increased funding to state child welfare agencies and tribes to respond to the needs of youth and young adults. This additional funding is time limited and it's available for most young people who experienced foster care after the age of 14 and who are not yet 27. Joining me today are two guests who will help us learn more about this act. Angie Rogers, who is the OKSA Yes I Can team lead, and Amanda Onko, the OKSA housing navigator. Hi, Angie and Amanda. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Robbie.
So Angie, I'm going to start with you and then we'll have Amanda answer the same question. Would you just please tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your position at the agency and with OKSA, and how you work to serve young adults in Oklahoma?
Sure. My name is Angie Rogers. I have been with the National Resource Center for Youth Services, working specifically with the OKSA program for over 5 years now. And I currently am the lead for the OKSA Yes I Can helpline. Yes I Can is a program supported by DHS through and I'm going to give you a long list here, John H. Chafee Foster Care Program for Successful Transition to Adulthood. We fondly refer to that as the Chafee Act. So the purpose of the program is to provide supportive services to assist youth and young people while they are in Oklahoma foster care, as well as during their transition out of foster care. So Yes I Can specialists answer a toll-free helpline that is available Monday through Friday. That can support young people, caseworkers, any other supportive adults, provide program information, support services, referrals, mentoring, and direct financial assistance. So we support the youth goals and plans. We are youth driven, and that can range anything from education and employment to transportation and housing.
Great, thanks Angie. Amanda, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your position within OKSA and how you work to serve young people in Oklahoma?
Sure. As Robbie mentioned, my name's Amanda Onko, and I am the OKSA housing navigator. And so my role with the program is that I go out and try to help develop housing relationships to open up housing pathways. And so what that really looks like is I'm going all throughout the state to try to connect with programs that have like transitional living programs. I'm working with continuums of care to see what type of housing funding is coming into communities. I'm trying to connect with landlords and then also housing authorities to try to open up additional housing pathways for the young people that are connecting with our Yes I Can helpline. So I'm continually trying to bring in additional resources so that when that helpline is connecting with those young adults and screening them for housing needs, they have those resources that they can then plug them back into.
Great, thanks Amanda. Now the name of this act is really pretty long, so much like Angie did with shortening it and calling it the Chafee Act, for today's session we are going to refer to this as the Pandemic Act, so we're all talking about the same thing. So Angie, I'm going to start with you again. Could you tell us a little bit about the act, when this Pandemic Act went into effect, and why do you think it is so important for young people in Oklahoma?
So the act was actually passed back on December 27th, 2020 during the last administration. However, as we are all aware of with government entities, there's a trickle-down effect of when it actually gets to the states, when the instructions get to the state, and when the money comes. So we haven't been working with it quite that long, but it does date back to December. Foster Club actually did 2 polls during the pandemic, and I'm going to give you some statistics from that. This is based on young people that we would serve under this new Pandemic Act. So the first poll was completed in May 13th of 2020. And at that time, half of the young people polled had lost employment and income. Nearly 1 in 5 had reported running out of food. And then more than half lost contact with a trusted adult who could provide support for them. So fast forward to 7 months later, just before this act passed in December 22nd to be exact of 2020, 66% of young people reported that they had been employed before the virus, and now it was down to 45%, and that's whether it was full-time or part-time. Only half of those who had applied for actually received that assistance. And education-wise, young people reported having difficulty focusing, challenges with virtual learning, lack of technology, whether that be computers, iPads, or lack of internet. Nearly 1 in 5 young people reported food insecurity. And as far as the supportive adults, it was about the same. Nearly 1 in 5 reported that they were completely on their own and had no connections. So you can see based on those numbers, how important this increased funding is to positively impact young people in Oklahoma by opening up the amount of supports and resources available to them.
Now that those polls that Foster Club did, that was national polling, would you say with your experience in Yes, I Can working with youth in Oklahoma that you're seeing some comparable types of situations?
At least comparable, if not maybe even more elevated.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Amanda?
Well, I was just going to add to what Angie was saying, because I know that she was hitting on some of the other things from that poll that impacted young people. And when you start to hear those things about the numbers of young people that their employment was impacted, it only would make sense that that's also trickling over into their housing and how that is impacting them as well. So with that first poll that they did, 43% of young people actually identified in that first foster care club poll from May 13th, 43% identified that they lacked stable housing and had a fear of homelessness at that time. By the time they got to that second polling, which was in December of 2020, 43% were forced to move because of COVID-19. 29% reported that they had found stable housing, and 14% had still not found stable housing. Many young people in this age group indicated that their housing was tied to their schooling and worried where they would go if school shut down. So we all know that this largely impacted those universities and those away from home schools that young people often are staying at. That largely impacted their housing stability as well. And then approximately 31% of those still in foster care were told that they could stay in their current placement, compared with 3% of those that were no longer in care. So you can see that we really made that effort with those that were still in care, but those that were out of care were really impacted by that housing insecurity during this pandemic.
And now, Amanda, I'll ask you the same question I just asked Angie. That was the national polling. So in your experience with young people just within Oklahoma, would you say that the housing instability issues are comparable in Oklahoma?
I would, and I would say that because we have so much of our rural area that maybe doesn't always have those services available to them, that can be impacting our young people as well.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, Angie, who actually qualifies to receive assistance under this new act? I'm assuming there's a whole lot of people that we couldn't serve before that we can now.
There definitely is. It's about quadrupled the amount of young people that can access services through Yes, I Can. So the age of eligibility for the funds under this new law actually extends up until their 27th birthday. So we can actually serve youth starting at 14 years of age if they are currently in foster care, youth who were in foster care at 14 or older and returned home through reunification, which is an entirely new population for us to be able to serve. So if they were in reunification past 14 and they're not yet 27, and then youth who exited foster care to guardianship or adoption after the age of 16 can access services up through their 27th birthday. And then also young adults who exited foster care at age 18 or older. So if they were in voluntary care up through age 27.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I understood that right and heard you correctly. Because previously I know that OKSA was not allowed to serve young people who were in trial reunification or reunited with biological families. So you're saying now during this pandemic act, you can serve OKSA, Yes, I can serve young people that are at their home with their biological families.
Yes, at least through September 30th of 2021 of this year, if they were in trial reunification past age 14. If they spent 1 day in foster care and then were reunified, they would be eligible for this pandemic funding.
Okay, so that kind of flows into my next question. You know, you've got this Pandemic Act and the federal government is trying to support all the states and tribes. How long are all the provisions in the act? How long are all of these things in effect? Or do these flexibilities to age, does this last?
So the services are available through September 30th of 2021. So through September 30th of this year is when we've been guaranteed to have that funding available through.
Okay, so for the next 4 months, we can serve young people up to the age of 27.
That's correct.
That is good to know, ladies. So Angie, how exactly is OKSA and Yes I Can responding to this act? I've read the actual act, and as you can imagine, it's a bunch of, you know, for all of you who haven't read it, it's a bunch of legislative gobbledygook. And so Angie, I'd like you to kind of sum up for this audience how OKSA is responding to this act, not including housing, and then Amanda will have you speak to the housing portion of that in just a moment.
Okay. So there is a lot of additional resources available for youth and young adults. We have allocated significant financial resources to assisting with transportation, technology, household needs, and general needs. I will throw in a little additional information on the technology right here. Every eligible young person in care, as well as those who've already left care, can access funds to purchase both a cell phone with service, and if they have not already utilized laptop funding, they would be eligible for a laptop starting at 14, which is a new, if there's workers on this, they're aware that that's a new eligibility. For instance, OKSA also incentivizes young people to get connected with our Yes I Can Aftercare network. So the incentive during this Pandemic Act has increased. And for those who used to formerly did not qualify for an incentive because they did not actually age out of care, if they're over 18 and reach out to us, they will also receive an incentive. Those funds are not tied to any specific need, so it gives the young person a lot of flexibility to use that money for whatever is best for them in their personal lives. Transportation, we've added a significant amount of funding for transportation, and we're basically using the cap that the federal government said we had to, but it can be very flexible as well. It can be for a purchase of a vehicle, insurance, vehicle maintenance, and transportation needs. I would also add on this that this has extended down to young people that are 16 or older. So they do have to have their driver's license if we're assisting with car related expenses, but previously, if a youth was in care, we did not assist with insurance or repairs, and that has changed. So if you had been told no in the past and that's still a need, I would encourage you to reach out. We've doubled the amount of funds available to assist young people with setting up their homes, anything from linens, kitchen items, furniture, small appliances. We've doubled the amount of funds to assist young people over 18 with medical needs that are not covered by Sooner Care. We do, if they were eligible for extended medical coverage, the dental and vision cuts off at 21. So this allows us to help that 21 to 27 population specifically with dental and vision. It's not limited to that, but that's a kind of a little loophole. Previously, we were unable to assist with financial needs related to young people who were pregnant or parenting. We were actually excluded from anything related to their child. But with this new legislation, it provides us the opportunity to assist with daycare as needed, maybe informal babysitting, and other needs such as a crib or a car seat for their child. It's a little bit of a holistic approach.
I see some questions coming in from Facebook. Janelle on Facebook is asking, can OKSA help a child who's in guardianship care and who just turned 14?
Unfortunately, with the Pandemic Act, it did not change the eligibility related to youth who enter guardianship or adoption. They have to have entered the guardianship or adoption after 16 to be eligible for OKSA services still.
Okay, that's good to know. It sounds like there's a lot of funds and a lot of opportunities for our young people. So Amanda, what are some of the innovative ways that OKSA is utilizing this funding to assist with housing needs for our young people?
Sure. So as you heard Angie saying, where we doubled a lot of our other funding, when it came to housing, we recognized how crucial it was for a young person to stay in their home or to try to keep them from entering into homelessness. And so when it came to that, we actually tripled the amount of funding that we had available for youth for rent and utility assistance. Now, the important thing to remember is that right now this funding assistance is, when it comes to rent and utility assistance, is for those youth who are 18 and older. It is there temporarily until September 30th, and it is for those youth who left care after 16 to an adoption or a guardianship, or who left care after 14 to return to their biological family. So those are some important things to remember about kind of the eligibility and how that has changed slightly from what we were previously able to offer. And so when you're considering that, and that we've tripled our amount of funding, we also started to look at how can we open up those additional pathways. And so some of the pathways that we have implemented are our OKSA Rapid Housing Program. This may be a good pathway for a young adult who is underemployed and may need just a little more time to get financially stable. This is a temporary tiered supported housing agreement that allows that young person to receive some assistance as they're entering into that first-time housing. Another option that we have is our OKSA room and board assistance. This is also a tiered compensation, and it is provided based upon the young person's unique circumstances. And they usually need to have some sort of supportive adult that's willing to enter into that room and board assistance contract with them. Another option that we have is our host homes. This is similar to the room and board option that OKSA offers. This is a partnership that we have with Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. It is also a short-term temporary option. It's currently only available in Oklahoma City and Tulsa at this time. It will require case management for both the young person and the host who is allowing the young person to stay in their home. And this allows us to work towards a longer term housing option for them. Another pathway that we have available for our homeless youth is the Foster Youth to Independence vouchers. If a young person is experiencing homelessness, this may be an option for them, and we would ask that they call our helpline to complete a housing assessment and determine if they meet eligibility for that program. Another thing that we have is our partnerships with our transitional living programs throughout the state of Oklahoma. Each of those programs do have slightly different models and guidelines to their programs. Some of those programs have shared living spaces. Some of them have private bedrooms. Some of them have their own independent apartments that they're in while they're participating in those programs. And so when it comes to transitional living programs, we do always encourage people to pay close attention to what those models are offering and what their requirements are. They do provide various different types of supports to young people who need those additional skills as they transition into adulthood. We're also exploring partnerships with youth service agencies to try to find housing solutions for both now and in the future. So programs and assistance for housing are based on need, and it's for a young person that is experiencing housing instability. So if any of your young adults or anyone on the line feels that they are experiencing that, you should contact our Yes I Can helpline to complete a housing assessment and determine what pathways may be available to you.
Okay, I have some follow-up questions for you specifically about some housing because you referenced a couple of things that I'm curious about a little bit more about. So the host homes sound very similar to room and board options as a short-term temporary solution. What would you say is the difference between a host home and room and board?
So with our host homes, those are largely adults that our young people are not necessarily connected to. If you're interested in being a host, you would go through a training that would certify you as a host to have a young person in your home. With that model, the young person and the host are going to have to agree to case management where they come into the home to speak with the young person and that host that is sponsoring them. With the OKSA room and board contract, it's not necessarily that they're going through a training. We're not requiring them to do case management, but we are asking that they have that supportive person already available that we could speak to about whether a room and board contract would be an option. So a lot of times young people have family or extended they have friends or extended family members that may be willing to let them stay in the home with them if they're able to contribute to that overall cost of living. And so if that's an option, that's where we would look to see if that might be a possibility to do a room and board contract. So the major difference is that case management requirement and the fact that they're going to go through a training and have someone coming into the home to make sure that they're participating in all pieces of that program.
Okay. I know that OKSA already was had some financial assistance available to help young people in certain circumstances with like housing and utility deposits and you sort of like an emergency rent needs. How does that differ from what you described as the OKSA rapid housing?
Okay, so rapid housing is a little bit different because it's a tiered model. So say that a young person is working, but they don't have that upfront cost to get into their apartment. Maybe they're needing help with that deposit and the utility costs that come up front. And if they were able to get into that apartment, but maybe needed some additional help with those costs, the rapid housing program is a 6-month program, and the rent will gradually go up. And so what happens is OKSA will contribute, a percentage of that the first 2 months, and then as the months go on, the youth's percentage of what they're covering will increase as well. If a young person is currently working and is already in their apartment and is in maintaining their home, but they're struggling because of the pandemic or because their employment was decreased, we do have rent and utility assistance outside of that. That would be different than our OKSA rapid housing program.
Okay, thank you. That does provide a little bit of clarity for me. Angie, I wanted to follow up with you, it's sort of you and Amanda. I've heard both of you talk about how the temporary eligibility and these funds are available until September 30th of this year. So just another 4 months. What does that do after September 30th? Are youth eligible for some of the same things, or who's eligible after September 30th? Does it all just go away? What does that look like?
As of right now, unless there's federal legislation to extend it, come October 1st, we would go back to our normal eligibility, which would mean between 18 and 21 who have aged out of the foster care system. If they were adopted or guardianship occurred after age 16. Unfortunately, right now for trial reunification, come October 1st, they would not be eligible for continued OKSA services. And I also want to point out something, just Amanda mentioned it, but I just kind of want to focus on it, if that's okay, Robbie.
Absolutely.
Typically, youth who enter adoption or guardianship after age 16 are eligible for OKSA aftercare services up to 21, with the exception of extended medical coverage and housing. With this act through September 30th, we are actually able to provide them housing assistance. So that is a group that was already eligible, but now they're eligible for something that they have not been eligible for in the past. So I think that'll probably, I know we've already assisted a couple, and I think that that's one of those things that getting the word out on is very important.
That actually sounds like a pretty big deal, being able to help with the housing. Sarah on Facebook has a question. She says, and this might lead us into our next question. She is working with a young person who is aging out later in June and has to leave their current home due to other children being present in the home. And this youth has a deprived case as well. She wants to know, how does this young person get help? What steps does a young person need to take?
They can contact us via email, which is OKSA, OKSA @ou.edu. They can contact the helpline, which is 800-397-2945. Or if they visit our website, which is www.oksa.ou.edu. And if you add the /pandemic aid, it will take you specifically to information about this act. I would also say, and I don't know that we've mentioned this or had planned to mention it, but part of this act does have, and I need to check the dates. Robbie may have access to them quicker than I am, but with the pandemic, it does prevent youth from aging out of the foster care system simply because they reached age 18. So there's kind of a moratorium on aging out if the young person wants to stay, and that can look very different than what we are used to with voluntary care. It doesn't necessarily mean a traditional foster care placement to remain in voluntary care.
That is good to know. That could be impactful for young people that are leaving. Thank you, Amanda. I see Amanda has put in the chat the 1-800 number and the website address. Holly from Facebook has a question. Does OKSA help out with a laptop or tablet to help with GED online classes?
Yes, so we, one of the things that we added is technology from age 14 up to 27. So they can obtain one between 14 and 16, another between 16 and 18, and then there's additional funding between 18 and 27. So a couple of caveats, if they have gotten one before, is it does have to be at least 12 months, and they're only allowed one at each of those time frames. So if they did purchase one at 19 and they're now 26, we might have to have some conversations about what happened with that. I can't say a definite yes or definite no, you know, if they're older and we've used this funding, because we do want to be as helpful as possible and help them reach their goals during this time.
Okay, so I heard a rumor the other day that OKSA will buy cars for young people. Is that true?
Sort of. So there's a lot of, I'm going to keep using this word, but there are a lot of caveats, because the way that the program instructions from the federal government came out is that all of the transportation funds are lumped together. So that could include driver's ed, car repairs, car insurance, car purchases. But if they do have their driver's license, I would encourage them to contact the helpline, either via the 800 number or the email, because we can assist with a car purchase. Right now, typically OKSA has a car match. So we match the financial contribution that the youth is making. And right now we're waiving that financial contribution. So we can assist with, I don't know if you want me to throw out amounts or not, because that always gets confusing, but the cap on transportation is $4,000. And as I just mentioned, there's a lot of things that can be included in that $4,000. So theoretically, if a young person can advocate to us what their other efforts are towards the purchase, even though they're not financial, we could theoretically purchase them a car up to $4,000. Like I said, it does require a conversation. So if that's something that you have someone interested in, I would encourage them to get in contact with us as soon as possible, because as Robbie mentioned, we're running down to less than 4 months now on the funding.
So I just heard something, and I want to make sure that I have this clear. Could I just go out and, like, I just heard you say that we could buy laptops, we could help with car purchase, Amanda was talking about housing. Can I just go buy some stuff and then contact OKSA and have you guys reimburse me?
We always encourage you to contact us before making a purchase that you would consider reimbursement for. That's because there's different categories, but if one category is capped out, there's certain things that have to be in place, and it's a little bit different for a youth in care versus a youth out of care, but we have to have a conversation. So part of our responsibility to the government utilizing this money is to show how we're supporting a youth's goals, and that we've had a conversation, and that why these items are being purchased. So all of that has to be documented. We always hate to tell somebody we can't reimburse for something with that expectation. So I would highly encourage you to contact us first. And it could be as simple as sending us an email and saying, this is what I need. And then we can have the conversation after the fact if it's something that's needed quickly.
Awesome. Okay, so another good question from Janelle on Facebook is coming in. She says that I'm needing a new vehicle and have $2,000 down, but I have had assistance with the vehicle before. Would I be eligible again?
With the pandemic funding, yes, you would. So it does not take into account a previous car purchase. It does not. It's a brand new category. So
awesome. That sounds like good news for Janelle. You've mentioned before that young people should contact OKSA via the email or the 1-800 number or the website. What would you encourage young people to consider or to be mindful of when they are contacting Yes, I Can? Is there specific information they need to know or that you need to know in order to be able to help them so they're kind of prepared for that conversation?
Yes, I would deeply encourage them to listen to the instructions on the voicemail. But the voicemail tells you to leave your full name, so first and last name, contact phone number with area code. We have 4 area codes, I think, in Oklahoma now, so that's important for us to be able to reach back with you. Right now, but like I said, we have quadrupled the amount of young people, but as of right now, we have not been able to increase the number of workers. We're working on that. So there is a little bit of a delayed time in us getting back to you compared to what you're used to. So it would be extremely helpful when you leave a message or send us an email if you could give us some days and times that are good for you. And then that gets us out of the we're calling you and you leaving a message and you're calling us back and leaving a message. But you will not be able right now to call and actually get through to a person. You will need to leave that message.
Oh, that is good to know. Amanda, related to housing and your suggestion that young people or supportive adults workers have young people call the Yes I Can number or email regarding the housing assessment. Are there things that you would encourage people to keep in mind related to housing?
Yes, and one of the things I did want to clarify was earlier you had asked whether these services would go away, since you've heard us say that, you know, a lot of these things might end on September 30th of this year because of the additional funding that we're receiving. However, when it does come to the housing pathways that we were discussing earlier, those are pathways that have been established with our program. Those are connections that we have made and that will continue past that September 30th date. So I did want to clarify that when we are talking about those being available pathways or options for young people, those will not disappear on September 30th. However, considering that, it's also important to keep in mind that there's not quick fixes to housing. I certainly wish that there were. We never want anyone to experience homelessness or end up in a shelter. So we would like people to be mindful that we may have to work through some short-term housing options as we journey through how we get to that long-term housing option and stability for young people. It's also really important that when you are contacting our helpline to complete that housing assessment, that you're transparent and open with our program specialists about what your housing needs are or why you feel like you're experiencing housing insecurities. The more open and honest you can be with those specialists helps them to better determine what you're actually eligible for and what types of resources that they can present to you. And then lastly, I would say that it's just really important to make sure that once you have connected with our helpline and you've done that housing assessment and they've began to give you some options, it's really important to follow through on those resources, contacts, or appointments that they may be setting up for you because they're reaching out to those people that we've made the connections with. We want to make sure that you have that person, the contact number, the date and time, or whoever we're handing you off to. But what helps expedite that is making sure that you also, as that supportive person or as that young adult, are following through on those recommendations that the helpline is making to you. That will help them assist you in entering into housing more quickly. So those would be my overall recommendations.
Okay. Ilyana on Facebook has a good question. So I'll leave that up to whichever one of you wants to respond, but she is asking, how do we find out about what the money is designated for? Is there anything on the website? Like, is there anywhere I could go to a big list and be like, hey, there's this amount available for this and this and this? How does that work? How would a young person best know?
The best way to know is to contact the helpline. We do not have a published list, and that's because we actually try to customize the services to what the young person is needing. So as an example, we've purchased a goat for a young person that is doing FFA. We have purchased an electric bicycle for somebody who did not want to get their driver's license, but they lived in an area that a regular bicycle was just a little bit pushing it to be their mode of transportation. So we want to talk with you if you can make a case for it. If it is something that's an absolute no, that we know that we've been told in the instructions that is not something that we can purchase, that gives us the opportunity to talk with the young person and figure out maybe another area that we can help them with that will free up the money so they can purchase that item that we're not allowed to help with.
Oh, okay. So if somebody called up and said, you know, I want a couple $100 for knitting needles and yarn. I don't know. I'm just making this up here, people. And you couldn't help with that. What I heard you say is that you would explore other areas of interest in their life or things that they're doing or needing to where you might be able to help with something else so they could free up some of their own money to spend on the knitting needles and yarn.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. A big thing, I'll just use this as an example because this is a wonderful example. And I think we could probably make a case to pay for knitting needles and yarn, just so you know.
See, that's good to know for all the crafty people out there.
But one of the big things that we get probably fairly regularly, even pre-pandemic funding, is a TV. Because as you're moving into your own place, a TV is something that everybody's going to want. And that is considered strictly entertainment item that we're not allowed to assist with. So if perhaps a young person hasn't opened their case or they've not done the Pandemic Act update, then they're going to get an incentive. That's something that we talk about. Or maybe you're in housing and you didn't know about us before, and so you just signed your lease and paid all that money yourself. Then we can have a conversation about maybe assisting you with reimbursement because you weren't aware of the steps and didn't know about this new eligibility. And then that would give you, X amount of money that you could use for whatever is going to benefit you, the TV.
Okay. Oh, we have another question coming in from Holly. She said she's currently 8 months pregnant and needs help with a car seat. Is that something that we can help with?
Currently, yes, it is. So
that is something that a young person would be eligible to receive assistance with up till September 30th, correct? Okay.
Yes, it is something that is not part of normal eligibility, but is specified we can assist with the pandemic funding.
Awesome. I'm loving these awesome questions that are coming in from everyone. So these are all of the pre-prepared questions that our presenters came up with for helping you guys understand this new Pandemic Act and a little bit about eligibility and what Oklahoma is doing. So we'd like to open it up to questions from anybody about specifics. Not case specific, but generalized specifics, so we can get you as much help as you need right at this moment. And for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, you can feel free to type those questions in the chat. And for those of you joining us on Facebook, just keep entering it in Facebook. Michaela would like to know, how do I go about getting a car for work?
First step in a car purchase is to call us. So we do need to have that conversation, especially since there's other funding that normally is separate that is tied in with that. But the biggest thing that we keep running into is that you do have to have your driver's license before we can assist you with getting that car. And then the rest is a conversation about, do you have a car picked out? Do you have a solid income to be able to continue your insurance? Or do you need to reserve a portion of that funding to be able to start your insurance and pay for tag and tax? So call us or shoot an email. Email is probably the best for a lot of people. That's the OKSA@ou.edu. And then you can give us some dates and times and we'll get you on the schedule and you'll know when we're going to call you that way.
Okay.
And then Angie, is it also true that, I know I heard you just say that they need the driver's license, but what if they don't have the driver's license? Is that just a hard no, you don't have the driver's license, or is there help with that as well?
It's a hard no till you get the driver's license. So that's a conversation that we can have with you about how we can assist you, what barriers you might have to getting the driver's license. We do know that there's a lot of barriers right now with the Real ID implementation that's going on across the state, as well as the shortage of driver's license examiners. So for a lot of young people, it's the ability to test in a car that's going to pass inspection on top of that as well. So we have driver's education funds that can be used not just for traditional driver's ed, but also for drive time and to take a drive test with one of the private schools that administers those. So that alleviates the responsibility of them having to find a car that has insurance and passes inspection.
Okay, thank you.
That brings up something else to my mind. Thanks, Amanda, for bringing that up about the driver's license. What about other, this Pandemic Act is supposed to be providing assistance for young people all the way up to age 27. Is there any provision for assisting young people with getting things like social security cards or birth certificates or, I don't know, a passport, anything like that?
yes to all of that. So we have funding available for that actually on a normal basis for young people that meet traditional, I'll use traditional at the moment, OKSA eligibility. But yes, we have funding for essential documents. Now, if they're in care, we might defer to, since DHS does have established pathways that they use to get those documents. But obviously it's super important that a young person has those, especially as they turn 18. If you do not have any original essential documents, it's going to prevent getting housing, it's going to prevent getting employment. So we are all about having those conversations and figuring out what we need to do to get those documents in place.
Okay. Carol is asking if a young person needs specific clothing for work, yes, I can help.
Yes, we can. Sorry, that's a lame joke that we have, and yes, I can. But yes, we can. So it's starting as young as 14, they have some employment funds. So if it is either a need for an interview outfit, we're not going to pay for, a full wardrobe, but if maybe they don't have semi-professional attire to wear to the interview, we can assist with that, and we can assist with anything uniform-wise that's going to be needed for them to maintain that employment.
Okay. Here's another question. Ilyana wants to know, would you help pay for a license that was suspended and just needs to be paid?
So that one is one of those ones where I would say call us so we can figure out a different way to assist. We're not typically able to assist with things that are considered like fines or fees for something that was done wrong. So I'm going to assume with a suspension that there was something tied to why it was suspended, but that would be a case where we would try to figure out if there was another pathway that we could provide financial assistance so they could divert their own money to pay for the fines.
Okay, that sounds like some pretty good flexibility there. Teresa is wanting to know, what about young people who might be involved with the Office of Juvenile Affairs or might be in a detention center? Is that designation for those young people, does that impact their ability to receive any of this assistance?
If they are in a detention facility, that's their placement, then right now they would not be eligible until they exit that detention facility. OJA custody in and of itself does not make a young person ineligible, as long as they also have that dual custody of being in child welfare custody. So if you're unsure, I would encourage you to reach out to us. I do know that some of the facilities in the DHS system that are labeled as detention are not technically a detention facility. So there's some room on that. But if it's a true detention facility, unfortunately, they're not eligible till that ends. Now, we are happy to work with them. If there's a timeline to get when they're getting out, we will definitely coordinate with their case manager there to make sure that everything is in place for them as they transition out of that facility.
So let's say they were in some kind of detention or OJA facility and they were getting ready to turn 18 and be out on their own. Yes, I can. Would they have, Amanda, would they have the ability to access any kind of funding to assist with housing?
Yes, as long as they had, as Angie was mentioning, that kind of dual custody of both being DHS and OJA, they would still have access to those housing services, and we would still work with their OJA workers to coordinate putting those services in place before they turned 18 and left care.
Okay. We've talked a lot today about how this Pandemic Act and how OKSA is utilizing the funds in Oklahoma impacts young people who are involved with the foster care system. How does it, is it any different for young people who are just involved with one of the tribes in Oklahoma?
It would not be different. The current agreement is that Oklahoma handles all of the Chafee funds for tribal or state custody. So we may need a bit more information because we may not have what we need, but they would still be able to access the services open and aftercare case if they're over 18, or we can serve them while they're in tribal custody between 14 and 18 as well.
Okay, so as long as a youth is either in foster care, the custody of the state of Oklahoma, or in foster care with one of the tribes, they would be eligible.
That is correct.
Okay. Ilyana has another fantastic question, and we haven't really talked about that yet. She's asking, how is ETV funding affected? How did this Pandemic Act affect all of the provisions for the educational supports that are available for youth?
So basically the ETV funding is mostly the same. I'll leave it at that. There are some caveats to some additional funding that this act passed, and if people read it, they'll see that. However, it did not extend the overall cap that a young person can access through ETV. So if they are already in ETV, I would encourage them to speak with their education specialist, because they'll be able to give them a bigger picture look of what that's going to mean for them. It did make it where they are able to access CHAFE funding at the same time. So all of the things that we're talking about, they're able to access those and not affect their ETV funding through September 30th. If it's somebody that is maybe looking at starting school in the fall and does not have an assigned education specialist yet, encourage them to contact the helpline, and then we'll connect them with the education specialist for the school that they are looking at attending, so they can get specific information.
Okay, so for those in the audience who do not know what ETV is referring to, that is the education and training voucher. Amanda or Angie, we've talked a lot about, this expanded Pandemic Act, but Ilyana's point, what if our audience is not aware of the assistance that Yes I Can provide with education overall? Are there specific things that young people who were in foster care in Oklahoma have access to that would help them attain post-secondary education?
Yes, so outside of the education training voucher program through OKSA, we have assistance to help our young people with educational needs as well. Is that what you're discussing?
Yeah, are there some specific things? We've talked a lot about how the pandemic money is affecting what Yes I Can is able to do, but just kind of some baselines. Are there some things that this audience might want to be aware of as far as supports that are available for education?
Are you talking specifically through Yes I Can or through ETV? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting confused.
Either one. Either one.
Which one do you want to field, Amanda? And I can field the other. So I'll let you talk, and then I'll piggyback on what you say.
You can give Yes I Cans.
Okay. So if a young person is not in post-secondary education, whether that be a vocational school or college, they do still have access to education funds through Yes I Can for kind of short-term certification. Maybe they're wanting to take a non-credit class at a VOTAC to learn photography or hone their skills at cake decorating. And then we also help with programs that are not Pell eligible. So that means they're a shorter term class like CNA, so a certified nurse's aide, CMA, certified medication aide, phlebotomy. There's probably more, but those are three that we see on a regular basis, as well as if it's a young person that wants to do vocational school or college and they have not completed their high school diploma and they come back to us, this is an excellent time for them to get their GED while we cover the cost of the GED.
Okay.
Then the flip side of that would be the education training voucher program is for those young people who are in higher ed. So that's going to be more like the technology schools, the community colleges, the universities. Those schools that are receiving Pell funding would be schools that are considered ETV program schools. And so that program is available to help those young people who are pursuing their higher education with things like the cost of tuition, books, supplies, some of that, depending on where they're attending, might be able to be applied towards their cost of living. So there's different things that can help assist with that higher educational cost as well through the education training voucher program, which is separate from our program. There are two different funding streams that come through those programs to provide those services. So those are some of the key differences.
Okay, thank you.
Can I piggyback on that? Because this is one of the questions I feel like we get a lot. If a young person is enrolled in school and they have an education specialist, they need to direct all of their funding questions directly to their education specialist. So it's we kind of view it as young people that plan to directly access the workforce are going to go through Yes I Can. People that are planning to go to college or vocational school go through the ETV program. So we're sister programs basically, but you can't be with the ETV program and then contact Yes I Can for funds. We're going to direct you back to your education specialist.
And does that mean once a young person is 18 or over, there's that split between Yes I Can and ETV?
Yes.
Okay. Holly's got another question. She wants to know, can OKSA help out with food funding or maybe housing items like, paper goods, toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies, that kind of thing?
With the pandemic funding, yes. So those are most of those things that are mentioned are things that we are not able to help with on a normal basis. But with the pandemic funding, that is something that we could assist with. So definitely contact us if those are your needs. And we can also connect you with community resources to make sure that those needs are met long term.
Excellent. Well, we have a few more minutes left if anybody else has any questions. Give a second. Some people are slow typers. I'm being one of them. If you are on Facebook, you can always continue to utilize our Facebook page and ask questions there, and OKSA can get back with you. Or like we've been saying, you can contact OKSA directly at oksa@ou.edu, which would be our email, or the 1-800 number, which is 1-800-397-2945. We also encourage you to visit our website, which is oksa.ou.edu. You can ask OKSA a question through that as well. So with that, we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. We hope it was informative and we helped you out. And most importantly, we hope that with your newfound knowledge that you help young people get connected with the Yes I Can program so they can access some of this wonderful funding that is available to them. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.